In today's webinar, we have Mr. Hariprasad Jayaram, founder of Anmaya Technologies. Anmaya Technologies provides specialized VLSI and embedded systems solutions for enterprise and defense sector clients. Hariprasad has also successfully built hardware products backed by government grants including NIDHI-Prayas and Elevate Karnataka grant. This webinar series by us, Stelna Designs, is being conducted in association with our strategic partners, Karnataka Digital Economy Mission. In this series, we bring startup founders to share real insights on hardware product development. Please enjoy the webinar.
Analysis to till the production level, we have in-house expertise for the systems. Coming to Anmaya's journey, right? So we ideated with one small product, which is of remote lab. Since I'm mainly into FPGA based background, so I have around 13 years of experience on the FPGA itself. I work for initially I work for defense tech, and then mainly into baseband and communication technologies in various industries like Samsung or Cambium networks. So when actually like I was frequently training various industry participants as well as the academia participants. So main issue, what I had seen when I was training as a uh, uh, guest faculty. I mean, I was a part of, still I'm a part of BITS Pilani work integrated learning program. So the major issue what I was seeing there is like accessing the hardware. I mean, even though I was teaching FPGA based uh, courses, so the students were not able to access or like get the hands-on like since like most of especially in the COVID or like post-COVID, most of the courses are like now become remote, right? I mean, in the will at least like in the Bits and will courses. So most of the industry participant around like each batch will have around 400 plus students. So the challenge what I was facing there is like what see FPGA or embedded, these are like mostly hands-on courses. So what we were saying is like they were not able to try whatever they are learning on the hardware, right? One option what they had to do is like either they had to buy this hardware and they can try this in their home, or maybe they had to visit like the remote labs which are being set up as a part of will, and they had to try what they learn. There are actually virtual labs, but again, like it is limited, maybe 5 to 10 lab equipments which are available. So, and again, like if they want to buy these FPGA based hardwares, it is like high cost hardwares. I mean, you know that the general hardware, it starts from 30K to 40K. So that is where, like, when we were brainstorming, we thought, why can't we address this problem with one of the, there are actually in UK and I think in Portugal, one of the company who is building similar solutions. So why can't we actually virtualize this hardware? It's a physical hardware and give this access to students. And again, like when I talk about virtualize, so one institute cannot have that. I mean, like when I talk about 400 participants, I cannot build like 400 hardware, right? 400 hardware from a single institute. So that's where like we thought decentralized hardware solutions with a remote lab kind of options. So I mean, again, there are many competitors. I mean, if you have seen NELIT from Calicut, they are building something similar. But again, one more challenge, even if you see the remote lab setups, what they are building. So generally, it will be a kind of a desktop followed by one FPGA hardware and the remote, the cameras connected to it. So whole setup used to cost around 70 to 80,000, right? So especially when it comes to academia, when I want to scale it. So basically we need low cost solution. So that's where like we brought the entire setup price into somewhere between 8 to 10K, right? So which we can actually scale it to multiple college, and now it is completely decentralized solution. I mean, these setups will not be in a single college, it will be spread across multiple colleges, and like each college can access other college hardware setup. So this is what we had done for FPGA based solution. This was the idea initially. Then as we know that like if I want to implement, even to run this as a pilot, right? Generally, like academic institutes, they work with the yearly budget. I mean, like it immediately I cannot go and pitch this solution and get the whole thing done. So this is where like the challenge what we were facing. I mean, in order to scale or in order to pilot, we had to at least deploy. I mean, when I say that like 400 students are there, at least 40 setup had to be deployed. So this is where like we try to pitch into various grants. And initially, we when we pitched this idea to Elevate Grant, so I mean the stage one, what you are seeing in Anmaya's journey, that was the ideation phase. So stage two, when we actually applied to grant, so initially, I mean, we tried to apply for a few grants, but we failed to get that grant because like we were not able to convince them like what we are trying to address. So with that, like I mean, with that learning, what we basically did is uh, we understood like what reviewers are actually. So even though our solution was impactful and like it has a lot of impact, especially for the rural colleges, I mean, where they don't have these lab setups, and there are other impacts also. Like I mean, if you see, it also helps in your solving of e-waste related issues, because like I mean, you know that like many colleges, one example I would like to give how this is addressing this e-waste related issue. So recently, when I was actually visiting one of the college nearby in and around Udupi, Mangalore, so they were about to dump around 30 hardware. I mean, nobody used to nobody know how to use that hardware, and they were about to scrap that, and these were like back somewhere like 2010 kind of hardwares, and no one was there to support that. So we took those 20 hardwares and we brought it into remote. I mean, now, I mean, actually, that 20 hardware, now it is accessible to multiple colleges. So this is one of the impact what we had, but we were not able to convince that actually to the reviewers. So then, like when we pitched one or two grant juries, so then like we understood what they are expecting, what in what language we have to speak to them so that like we can convince them. So this is when like I mean, when we approached to Elevate 24, so we knew that like what they are expecting and like how we have to pitch to them, and we pitched our idea of this remote lab solutions, and yeah, we got that funding. So around 23 lakh grant we got for the product what we had to pilot. So then basically we built the entire solution with like whatever the FPGA hardware, along with a tiny hardware we built, which can be can it's a kind of supportive hardware. When I was telling you that, like I mean, if the whole system along with the desktop and FPGA, that's how like most of the virtual lab right now. If you see, central government has some virtual lab. If you see that kind of setup, so that is brought down into a tiny hardware and plus FPGA together, it will be costing around 8 to 10K. So then like we were able to scale, and I mean, the journey is not as simple as we say when we are also actually when we talk about hardware design, right? So there are like a lot of challenge which I'll be talking in upcoming slides. So we built the product, and now we piloted in at least around 4 to 5 colleges actually. So the entire thing, right? So we it's a kind of learning curve what we have. So we have a complete product what we have built, and now we are actually generating the revenue out of it, and like we are deploying into various colleges. So general landscape, right? So I mean, when we talk about any products, so it will be idea stage, as I was telling, like how we generated an idea and then we get it into prototype. So initially, to have idea in the idea stage, right, we need like maybe less than 10 lakh. But when we want to productize, like in my case, like when I want to put it into various college, when I want to when I want to run a pilot build in various college, at least I need up to 50 lakh, right? So generally, as a founder, I mean, I'll be always having a question. So what if this solution doesn't work, right? So and again, like in college, it's a risky business. I mean, the convincing the college is always it's a tough job. So and again, when we wanted to run it for the college, so always in college there is a tendency that unless this solution is implemented on some other college or some other tier one college, they're not going to buy your solution. So that is the biggest challenge what we face. So that is where like grant helped us a lot. I mean, initially in this scenario, right? So none of the investors will come and invest you for this kind of scenarios. So and as I was telling, like our first customer is a bit. So with that tag, we were able to scale like anything. I mean, we have one pilot in bits, and like we will be scaling in multiple colleges. So for that stage, I mean, it hardly takes around 50 lakh, right? So when you want to productize, I mean, now we are in this stage right now. So when we want to productize now, actually, like I mean, let's say I was telling you around 400 students are in each batch, and like each 400 students, let's say like I'm running a class and like I want to give access this 400 units, so I need to scale to that level, right? So here like you need generally you'll be needing huge money, right? So now, you know that like, I mean, when you want to have an ideation stage, right? So one general grants what you're having in the market right now in from the government is NIDHI-Prayas, generally like what people will go. So we are also NIDHI-Prayas funded, but not for this product. So again, like I'll be coming to that point, like how did we get that NIDHI-Prayas funding for one of our product? So you can start with a NIDHI-Prayas, so which will be around 10 lakh grant what you get. So for the prototyping. So but when let's say like when you want to take it to market initial market testing, like initial pilot runs. So you can always use seed fund scheme, which you'll be getting around 50 lakh, or you have Elevate kind of grants. Again, now Elevate is actually, they scaled into around 1 crore, I guess, for deep tech startups. So you can always use those kind of funding. So the 23 lakh what we got, so that was more than enough for us to run the pilot fund. Now, when I want to productization, now we are actually trying to get various different funds. So there are, I mean, if you see from Karnataka government itself, they have something called R&D funding. So up to 2 crore you can get. So if you have a proper R&D idea, right? So there are also programs like Samriddhi. I mean, there are programs from IDEX, which you can get up to 1.5 crore, right? So ideally, whole initial set of executions, right? So we can build with the grants itself. So if you are able to convince the product has market fit and it has an impact. So I mean, one big thing what I have learned from the grant journey, right? So generally these grants, what government gives, it's more than like scaling your startup. So they look for the impact. Let's say if I'm applying for Karnataka government Elevate, so they see that like what kind of impact you are going to do for the Karnataka government, or as a Karnataka, what you're going to do for the society, right? So let's say like in my case, like when I applied for Elevate grant, my story was something like the rural area students can get an access for rural area students can get access for this kind of hardwares. So my focus was tier 2 and tier 3 college, where the story was like the tier 2 and tier 3 colleges doesn't have this hardware, right? So one example I can give you, like how I try to convince them is like, see, I was training at that time. I mean, I was extensively going for various training in and around Udupi, Mangalore, with the tier 3, tier 2 rural colleges. So I had a story that like one day I visited a uh, so and so college, and when I went to that college, and that student did not know what FPGA is, right? So then I said that like, see, in the current trend, FPGA is one of the important thing which need to be taught in this curriculum. And now the Karnataka students, the rural students, are missing this opportunity. And being a semiconductor hub, the Karnataka is being a semiconductor hub, and student doesn't have this opportunity to learn this FPGA. So with my solution, uh, being like, I mean, all the hardwares being removed, and without these rural colleges are uh, implementing these in their lab, let's say if they have financial trouble, they can access this hardware and get a solution to it. So this kind of impactful story you should have before applying to any of the grants, right? So see, for the investors, it will be generally like uh, how your solution is going to make money, right? But for the grant, along with the business point of view, you should have some kind of impact. That is very much important, right? So it should make some impact towards the society. Mm. So with that, keeping in mind, so generally getting the grant is a easier task, right? So generally, as I was telling, uh, one important thing what you have, like when I say that like impact, along with the impact, you should have some technical claim. And one more important thing what I would like to tell you with respect to grant is not something like they'll fund you and you can utilize that fund like maybe next down the lane 3 years or 4 years. So it is a milestone link, let's say like in the Elevate. So generally it is divided into two tranches, like trench one and trench two, right? So in trench one, we should have certain deliverable milestone. So this whole grants will like works like a project, right? So when a customer give you a project, so he expects that like these milestones are these are the defined milestone, and within these milestone, you should deliver a product, right? The same way, these grants also work in the similar manner, where they'll be giving you various tranches. So let's say in IDEX, they have, I think, around 4 tranches or 4 or 5, depends on like the grant what we have. They have some programs like Aditi and various different uh, schemes are there. So depending on that, like whether it's 25 crore grant or 1.5 crore grant, we'll have various tranches. So the entire grant, right, it works with respect to milestone deliverable. So if you're not able to justify these milestones, right, so then you'll not be able to get the grant. So you should be able to justify these milestones. So, and another important thing is like team credibility. So whenever you pitched any grants, right, so they also look into the founding team, right? So that is one of the important factor. So whatever the team you project, that team should be able to execute the entire project, right? So that is one of the important thing. So in our case, like me and like my co-founding team, most of the people who are like worked on these FPGA based product. So whenever we were able to, whenever we were pitching this whole idea, so they were asking certain questions with respect to the execution plan. So we were able to easily justify how we are going to execute this whole project and how it is executed, right? So these are various steps what we had. So the team credibility is very important. So they look into who are the founders, who are the co-founders, how you're going to execute the whole thing, right? And even though I said that like the grants are looking for the um, impact, um, along with the impact, there should be a commercialization plan. So whatever the startups we build, so that should have a commercialization plan, right? So you should have proper commercialization plan. Let's say along with the impact, what you're going to create. So how you're going to commercialize this product. So that is very much important. So you should have a clear idea about commercialization. So in our case, like whenever I was pitching our uh, uh, remote lab solution. So we had a proper go-to-market strategy and business plan, like how we are going to monetize this. So we have certain license-based models. We have, along with the remote lab, we have certain products linked to it. So let's say if I'm selling my remote lab license, so I'll be also selling various hardwares to them, to the college. So I have proper business plan for each of the proposal what I have made, right? So you should have a clear business plan what you are doing, right? So that is very important for the grants, right? So generally, like whatever the proposal structure we make, it will be kind of problem. What technical approach I'm following, what are the milestones I'll be achieving, and what is the team and what infra I have, right? So one important point I would like to make here. So whenever you are approaching, I have seen many grant proposals, right? I mean, whenever I actually trying to pitch or like those who consulted me for taking an idea or understanding about grants. So many a times where you fail is, especially in the IDEX also, IDEX is a defense challenge. So you just pitch your idea, right? Nowadays, like generating an idea is not a big deal. I mean, if you just ask a Claude that like I have these ideas, so can you just polish it and generate a uh, pitch deck for it? So it is going to generate. So in order to convince your grand jury, right? So basically nowadays, like they will be convinced only if you have a small prototype or background work for it, especially in the hardware scenario. Let's say one of the example, like we co-work with multiple uh, clients, right? So one of our client is IDEX winner in 2023. So their idea was basically a SATCOM based communication system. It's basically for a Navy. So like initially the similar idea they had pitched to multiple grants, they were not able to go through that. So then they did a small proto. I mean, see, when I say that, like I am doing certain proto, it need not be a complex PCB fabricated, which you are going to give it to the, which you are showing it to the jury, right? So what they did, like they took one small hardware, which is a kind of Pluto hardware you might have heard about if you are from the hardware background. So they took that hardware, they written some firmware for that. They shown that like how it is going to communicate like wirelessly, right? So that to Pluto hardware. And they added some firmware with respect to satellite. And they said like we are capable of demonstrating this. And uh, this is what we are going to extend for the satellite communication. I mean, they said that like this particular Pluto will be replaced with our own custom PCB, and that's how they convinced the jury, and they were able to get the 1.5 crore grant of IDEX, right? So this is how actually, like, I mean, unless you have a proto, nowadays, like convincing the jury is very difficult. So you should have some proto, working proto, which will give them confidence that like you have done something and which can be extended to the productizable level. In our case, when we pitched for the remote lab, we had a PCB. It's a Max 10 FPGA based hardware, which was fabricated, and we demonstrated that like we already have built this hardware, which is FPGA based hardware, and we also shown the mathematics saying that like uh, currently if a college, I mean, we had shown some figures that if a college wants to procure a FPGA based hardware, so currently like they're spending around 30 to 40,000 just to procure the FPGA hardware. And whatever the hardware we had built, it was a CPLD based hardware, and we convinced them that like, see, the students doesn't need this complex hardware in their lab. Hardly they'll be doing some kind of LED blinking 7 segment or such kind of experiment. So they need like hardly 10K lookup table FPGAs. So we built a hardware which is costing around 3,000. So this will help to procure more number of hardwares to the college, and again they're connecting this remotely and they can access from anywhere. So that kind of story is very important with the small prototype, right? So that is very much needed. So, and you should also have a proper budget justification, and especially in the grants, right? So every penny what you have spent, so that has to be audited. So the way of utilization of budget, right? So that must be justified, right? So you should have a pre-budget, and which should be proposed to the jury, and like you should say that like this is the budget what you are going to spend. That should be justifiable. If I say that like I'm going to build one prototype and I need 50 lakh budget, so they're not going to agree that, right? So you should have a proper budget, and you should show that like, let's say in my case I had FPGA hardware, hardly I need like 1 to 2 lakh to build that. So when I ask 50 lakh budget as a part of Elevate, I should have a proper plan that where I'm going to spend. So in my case, I'm going to scale that remote lab solution across multiple college. That is where I need that 50 lakh, right? So that way you need to have proper budget, which you should be able to convince the jury. That is very much important. And you should also have risk mitigation. Let's say like if this is not going to work, so what next? And especially in our whoever from hardware background, you must be very much experienced with the supply chain challenges, right? So what you commit to your customer, 100% you will not be able to deliver. So in my case itself, I mean, today itself, I just got some scolding from the clients that like you're not supplying whatever the hardware we have requested. You know that like currently the supply chain issues what we are facing due to the war. So uh, this supply chain issues, how you're going to mitigate, right? So that plan you should have, proper plan you should have in your grant proposals. And one important thing, this is like in any of the grants, right? Especially if you are applying for any DST grants. So they look for IPs. So because I mean, these are actually, especially DST grants works for the IP, right? So they look for some IP generated out of these grants for the country. So you should justify that like whatever the solution you are building, it is going to generate certain IP. So that is very much important. So basically, what are the challenges you will face when you build any hardware products? Right? In my experience, I'm just telling. So you know that like when you are building a POC, so generally like in my case, I use dev kits, development kits of FPGA, or uh, I build one proper POC. But when you go for the production, that is where you face the challenges, right? So your design should be compatible with various stuffs, right? So one example I would like to give you, like recently, which we are facing, still we are facing, right? So the supply chain issues. I mean, like let's say if you say that like this particular grant is like for 6 months, right? So now if you are productizing that, right? So you have to spend that budget within like 6 months or 1 year. But whenever you are actually planning the whole thing, right? So you should see all these risks, what you get. So let's say like in if you want to build your own PCB, so the challenge is like procurement challenge. Each FPGA, let's say in our FPGAs, like each FPGAs, some of the FPGAs will have a lead time of 4 to 5 months, right? So if you're not able to procure that and demonstrate, then you're not going to get the next tranche of it, right? So you should have a proper plan. Maybe like initially, like in the first tranche, you should make a plan or like make a milestone such a way that like you can show in some uh, eval board or like which is a kind of working model. Then maybe during productization you can go with proper PCB fabrication ways. So I mean, one of the product what we try to fabricate, right? So we actually promised customer that like around 2 months of lead time. Then what happened, like especially this FPGAs, we don't have proper fabrication facilities, right, in most of the places. Especially we work in Udupi and Mangalore, so we had like a lot of challenges in terms of getting VGA fabricated. So these kind of challenges you have to like keep in mind whenever you are proposing, right? And there are various ways, and like there are various ways to accelerate that, and you should have proper idea of the ways how you can accelerate, whether you can outsource certain part of it, maybe procurement part, or get experts on board to get these accelerated. That is very much important. So in case of in our FPGA based design, so for the smaller FPGAs, it's fine. Like we can use open source. But let's say like if you want to go for high-end FPGAs. I mean, we also serve for space tech applications, right? Most of the space tech application tools are license-based. So these are some of the challenges what we generally face. I mean, when we want to go for production, we have to get these licenses. So we have to mitigate, we have to add all this costing into our budget. And one more important learning what I have seen in my journey is a proper version planning, right? So I recommend you to use most of the tools what is available in the market and in the beginning itself, right? So when the team grows, when our project becomes the production level, right? So if you don't have a proper version planning or the maintenance using general tools like Git or anything. So it is very difficult to survive when it goes for the production ready. So we have seen that, like, I mean, generally, like as a startup, when we started, like we did not had all this tool which we used to. I mean, still like engineers are not ready to use because like, you know that like, especially in electronics, guys are not much familiar with Git or those kind of tools. But unless we use, right? So one issue, what I can say that like what had happened to us. So whatever the Gerber file we had sent for production was like different than like what he was working, right? So unless you have a proper release mechanism or version controlling, so it is very difficult to. I mean, these are all the small things, but what happens is like these things keep on accumulating to your delivery time. Okay, so this is not with respect to your grants also. I mean, this is with respect to your real time products as well. So you have to be very uh, cautious about that. So supply chain, right? So see, initially, whenever we build, we go with local vendors or robo. That works well for us. But now when I want to produce 100 units or 200 units, I should have proper supply chain and qualified vendors. So there are various stories behind that. I mean, like whoever worked, I think like in this call also, few of who face similar issues with respect to vendors are there. I think like Kiran and some people are there. So that is very much that is the pain point, major pain point what we face in hardware supply chain. Like we should have a qualified vendor because most of the components what we use those are imported one, right? There is a lot of issues. There are many vendors in and around who will tell you that like you're going to supply, they will show you the competitive pricing. But when it comes to the execution, right? So a lot of challenge in terms of customs or importing. And nowadays, like there are like a lot of hurdles in terms of imports, right? So you know that like many components we have to give the declaration which we are importing from US. So you have to keep all this in mind when you are actually giving the budget as well as timelines, right? Not only for the grants, for your actual products as well, right? So and yield, right? So this is one of the major problem, right? Say let's say like you have 50 boards manufactured, right? So you should have a proper vendor who can deliver you like proper, I mean, maybe like at least 90% of the yield, right? So else your most of the time will go for debugging these boards which are not working, right? So for the larger companies, it is fine, but as a small companies, right, what happens is like if the time and resource what you have is like maybe limited. So you cannot spend much time on like debugging or fixing these tiny issues. So these parameters you have to keep in mind when you are building any hardware products, right? So, I mean, in my case, we generally, one of the approach what we followed, I would like to give you an example. So, uh, there is multiple combinations and permutation with respect to FPGA, right? So one approach what we adopted is basically SOM based, SOM based, system on module based approach. So many companies, I mean many clients, right? So they come up with different requirements. Let's say like space companies are asking for communication systems, and like we have one client who is working on ADAS. So he need uh, like maybe radar or detection kind of logic, sensor based logics. So now currently what we are doing, we are building one approach that is a SOM-based approach. What we are doing, we are actually having one FPGA and we generally go for daughter board and the carrier board approach. So now it is actually saving us a lot in terms of redesigning. So let's say for the initial prototype of clients, what we are doing, let's say like if the client says that like I want this particular FPGA and this particular peripheral configuration, right? So we have 6 to 7 different carrier configuration what we have built, and 6 to 7 different FPGA configuration what we have built with the common connector configuration. So the SOM approach what we are following, so it is helping us to actually scale easily. So I can propose to any of the customer with this particular configuration. So whenever we build hardwares, right? So you know that like the challenges what I was mentioning. So we have to keep in mind that like how can mitigate those challenges. So this is one of the approach what I followed. I just went to the SOM approach and I try to have permutations and combinations, so I can easily in the initial prototyping, right, I can easily deliver to the customer. So these kind of approaches you have to basically adopt, right? So here like we followed 7 stages that was actually in the uh, initial stage, right? So problem statement, POC, reference board, then we went for the custom board and BFM review. So this was for the whole grant period. So now when we are actually going for pilot batch, so now whatever the early revenues and like some of the funding from our own pockets, right, we are pushing. So this is where like we started generating the revenue and we started pushing towards production, and that early revenue what we are generating, we are reinvesting back to the system. So as I was telling, whatever the ideas or like budgeting you do, right? So you have to keep the 6 point, the DFM check, what you do, that is very much important. So whatever fabrication units are there, you have to penalize in the sense like, you know, that panel based architecture, right? So that is very much important. And whatever the components you choose, right? So, and you should see that like, what is the supply chain of it? So there are various scenarios, right? I mean, let's say like in our case, whenever we choose a component, we make sure that the components are available in the assembly guide itself. So one of our so as component procurement and assembly done by same unit itself. So we choose our components such a way that like this matches. So these kind of strategies you have to adopt, because see whole
Hello.
yeah, tell me.
Hello. Hello. Yes. Yeah, Amit, can you hear me? Yes, ma'am.
Can you mute yourself? Maybe we can have a question and answer at the end. So we basically have we have a plan or a strategy that like we make sure that like this way the component costing or like the whole timeline will be reduced. So this is one of the approach what we followed. Like I mean, the PCB fabrication, assembly, and component procurement will be done. Whole thing, the whole supply chain will be handled by one vendor itself. So this strategy worked well for us. So previously when we were like started our product, right? So we were trying to give assembly PCB fabrication for one person, assembly for one person, and the component procurement for the one vendor. So this actually made us wait for a long time, because for this to work, right, so there is a proper synchronization is required, right? So or else like it will be a big mess. So the strategy of outsourcing everything to one vendor, it helped us a lot. So this kind of strategy you have to plan, right? So, and let's say if any of the component what you're procuring, so you should make sure that like that has proper second source, in a sense like if this vendor is not going to supply, so what is the plan B for it? So that is very much required, right? And whatever layouts or things you build, so that should be assembly friendly. So that should support, see, all the layouts whatever you build, so that is not assembly friendly, right? So you have to plan such a way that like the assemblers or PCB fabricators who are supporting you, so they are able to fabricate this. So that is very much important. And many a times as a founders, right, so because of limited resources, we do everything sequentially. Let's say like I build the hardware, then I go for firmware development, then maybe testing plan, right? So the sequential way doesn't work, right? So in the initial stage, actually, the sequential way doesn't work. So everything has to have a proper plan. Let's say like if somebody is building the hardware, parallelly someone should be building a firmware for it, because we have a limited time. So the proper strategy, right? So for the assembly and fabrication, we should have a proper end-to-end plan. Then only we can survive. So initial stage, right? One thing what we have realized, uh, the whole thing, right? The spending what you do, it should be, you should be cautious about it. So because uh, many a times I have seen that like over hiring of the engineers, or they spend mostly on branding, right? Founders early salary. I mean, and again, like in the grants, there is always limitation. You cannot take a salary as much as you want. So there is a limitation, like especially in Elevate, you have a limitation of 50K grant what you can take as a salary. So these are some of the mistakes what people does. right? So you should invest your grants for the valuable things. So see, one more big mistake what I've seen with most of the founders based on the grants, they focus on investing that grant money for the product what they have proposed, right? So that is the biggest mistake, right? So your whole company is not standing on that particular product, right? So whenever you are building your product, make sure that like the investment what you make out of that grant, so that is helping you to scale your company, maybe long term, right? So that investment should be long term investment. That shouldn't be like just for that product. So I'm going to spend this product for this product and I'm going to end that. It's not the case. So whatever you are spending, it should be a kind of long term investment. So see, let's say like in my product, what I'm building for the Elevate brand. So each investments, what I'm doing, so I'm making sure that like the outcome of that product, right? Let's say even though right now it is for the remote lab, but the sub products what I'm building, so that will help me to scale my company. Let's say like the hardware, FPGA hardware, what I'm building. So that is for remote lab. What I have proposed for Elevate, that is for remote lab, that purpose will be served. But the same FPGA hardware what I have built, right? So that will be used for other customers also. That can be used for other customers also, right? So that approach you should follow. Then only you can scale, or else like you'll be building the product and grant money is done. So if you do not have a proper plan, go ahead. So then you will start running behind investors or I mean, many times it happens that like they'll burn out and they'll stop. So that shouldn't happen. So you should have a proper plan. Like, okay, let's say like this is done. So what next, right? So then it will be easily scaled. I mean, that can be used for scale, right? So uh, yeah. So basically, some of the points. This is not with respect to grant. So general points. So whenever with not with respect to this point, I'll just generally conclude by telling what I have learned. So whenever you commit to the customers, right? So some of the points you have to make sure that like you have a proper written down deliverables. It is with respect to products also. You might have seen that like in hardware startups or most of the startups, what happens is like customer will orally say that like I want this. So if you do not have written down proper plan that like what you're going to deliver, right? So your requirement from the customers will be keep on adding, right? The same way in the grants also, if you do not have a proper milestone that like what you're going to deliver to the customer or like what you're going to deliver as a part of grant, so you will not be able to justify that like you have completed that, right? So you should have a proper plan for it, right? And whatever you use out of grants, right? So that should have a proper credible documents. So that is where many people will struggle post grant, right? So whatever the spend you do, expenses you do, so that has to be have proper documentation. So everything has to be CA audited, right? So that grant utilization has to be credibly used. When one point I mentioned that like this grant utilization, whatever you are doing, so you have to think long term in mind and you have to spend it. So that doesn't mean that like you can use this grant for anything, right? So it should be within the boundary of what you have proposed. So that is very much important. Okay. Uh, so 7 things that you should take with you. So grants are not free money, right? So that is conditional runway. So uh, treat them like a thorough investor. So you cannot spend as you want, right? So whatever the POC you build, so that should be manufacturable, right? And see, in my case, whenever I propose my customer, or whenever I tell what I do, so my substrate is FPGA, system on module, VLSI, right? So you should have a proper point, I mean, proper USP about your product when you pitch, right? And the DFM plans, whatever mentioned, right? It saves a lot, right? So you should have a proper plan and proper supply chain management. So that will save a lot. So I was telling you about one scenario where we chose multiple vendors, right? So basically, it costed us a lot in terms of supply, shipping. Our own engineers had to go there, debug it, right? So this kind of costing you have to keep in mind whenever you do it, right? And basically your grant issue, right? So the grant money you have to use for R&D, but when it comes to the productization, then you can use your founder revenues, right? Founder money, founder capital, or early stage revenue, right? So this grant money, always it is helpful for your R&D stage. So not only these grants, I mean, you can explore Karnataka government ESDM fund also. So they are giving around 2 crore funding for your R&D. So these kind of fundings you can explore, right? So, and whenever you build, right? So many a times the geo strategy works well, right? So uh, as an early product, right? So nobody will trust that product, right? So you should start running pilots without expecting any of the revenue. So in our case, like whatever the initial pilot we ran with the college, so that was like kind of free model what we have run, right? So then once you get the credibility, then you should start selling your product, right? As a startup, like you are new to the market, right? So there are various players. So to gain that trust, you should start running this free pilot. So then only if the free pilots are working, so at least it will give you a marketing, plus you can tell to other people that like these products are running here and here. So that will give you a credibility. So that building a credibility is very important in the initial stage, right? Okay, that's all from my side. So if you have any questions, it's open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Hari. That was insightful. Two things. One is, do you generally have a grant jury who interacts with you, or is it like a standard investor, panel who may or may not interact with you? They just listen and they may say.
They will interact. They will ask the questions. So in my case, there were actually 2 rounds of interactions. So initially, it was just pitch deck we'll be sharing to the Elevate. Then we had 1 round of interaction with the jury where they asked various questions, and like they asked like what is the plan for GTM. In the next stage, there were like juries from some of the juries from my field itself, and they were able to relate like what I was speaking, and then they ask the questions also, like what I'm going to do, what is my plan, what is the impact. There will be interaction. Actually, it is not just a kind of one-way communication.
Gotcha. Thank you.
There's a question in the chat. Like, it's about how long does it take to get the grants and all those things. You can give a quick.
Yeah, it depends. Yeah, it depends on the scheme to scheme, right? So in Elevate, now they have a timeline fixed, saying that like 90 days. Within 90 days, they'll close the entire thing, right? So in my case, the proposal started in December. We got the money by end of March. Before, I think, if I'm not wrong, just before the March end. That's where they had to close the March end thing, right? So it was 90 days time, and depends on, I mean, like if it is NIDHI-Prayas, it depends on incubator. NIDHI-Prayas funding was like, I think it hardly took around 15 to 20 days, right? So it depends on various, and like IDEX is the longest process. I think like it takes 6 to 7 months to finalize. How much fund will get approved by government? It depends again. Depends on your proposal. So in Elevate, like our proposal was 50 lakh, it got approved for 23 lakh, right? So it is not that like based on your project, based on their fund also, right? So I think at the max this time Elevate people got around 30 lakh, right? So it depends on like the overall, they'll be having some pool of fund, so they'll be distributing among the winners. And some cases like NIDHI-Prayas and all, it will be, let's say if they say 10 lakhs, so they'll evaluate based on like generally this DST based funding, it will be technical juries will be there in the panel. So they can measure how much you need for the prototype to build, right? So they can gauge that. So based on that, like even NIDHI-Prayas, he can get like 2 lakh or like 9 lakh, depends on your proposal, the product, what it requires.
Thank everybody for participating in this webinar. I have also shared our LinkedIn page link here. Feel free to follow or to get updates on further webinars. Thank you, everyone. We'll wrap up the webinar here.